Hi, everybody, and welcome once again. You are in our Wednesday night webinar, and this is our Diversity Matters series, where we do that once a month, where we like to have topics of diversity, conversations about diverse topics, all sorts of presentations of OCD from different communities and presentations, and it's always exciting to have guests on with me as well, too. So I want to welcome some of our OCD therapists on board, and I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves. So Foluso, would you like to start?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Foluso Solarin, and I'm a licensed psychologist.
Wonderful. And Vicki?
I'm Vicki Scott, and I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Wonderful. And I am your host for Fantasy Island, Ricardo No, I'm not Ricardo Montalban. I am Patrick McGrath. I'm head of clinical services for OCD, and it's always good to be here with all of you. This wonderful hour weekly brought to you by OCD. OCD you can download on Google Play or iOS, and you can go to treatmyocd.com or nocd.com. And if you're interested in teletherapy, boy, do we have some good news for you. We have it. That's what we do. So we have teletherapy in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and now in the United Kingdom as well. So please feel free to reach out to us, schedule a 15-minute call with us so that we can see if OCD therapy might be helpful for you. And by the way, we are continuing to get more and more insurance coverage as well for all of the work that we're doing. So it's very exciting for all of us. So we'll spend a few minutes. As always, people are going to be throwing all the questions into the chat there area. But, let me start with Foluso. It was almost a year ago that we did our first Diversity Matters webinar, and you were in the very first one we did. And that was an exciting time. And I remember talking about, we hit lots of things, but I think that some of the most important topics were the idea of how, for good cultural sensitivity, it's always important to ask somebody, how they want to be referred to, right? And also to know how to pronounce someone's name correctly, and those types of things are just so very important to people. And I just know if you wanted to throw anything else on that, because it was such a great conversation that we had last year about it. So
yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, you hit on those topics really well. I think that that's great for therapists to do that, and I think it's also really good too as a client to not be concerned or not be afraid to also assert that too if you're with a therapist. So if they sometimes the issue of culture and the issue of race is one that is sometimes not easy to bring up, and so sometimes with if you are a client in the therapist's office, that's something that you can always bring up sometimes if you feel that might not be addressed as part of your own growth as a client, and say, hey, this is how I'd like to be referred to, or this is how you need to pronounce my name. It's just part of an uncomfortable conversation that can come up, but it's great for you as a client to bring that up, and also a way to sort of gauge too what the what your, I guess, what the climate is, for you to bring up those sorts of things, because sometimes for clients, those things can be, kind of difficult to discuss. So I always, it's just something to not feel afraid to bring up, I guess. So yeah, those things that you talked about, spelling of a name, bringing up a name, talking about culture, let's just not be afraid to bring up the discussion.
Yeah. Vicki, would you want to throw in anything on that as well too?
No, I just think that it's really important to be aware of some of the cultural stigmas on mental health, and to be really open and welcoming and offering as much psychoeducation and background information to make new clients more comfortable to be able to share what their hesitation and reservations were for seeking help to begin with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I agree. Such an important thing, and I think in our climate, in where we're at today, and just with all of the things that kicked off our Diversity Matters series, the unrest that we were seeing last year, and how we didn't want to let that go. I mean, it was my fear that that would happen, and then sometimes what often happens is an event happens, everybody rallies around it for a month or two, and then everybody forgets about it. And I didn't want to let that happen. So that's why we really started this series, to make sure that we were continuously discussing these types of concerns and issues. And I want to ask the two of you, and what, obviously I'm a white male. So for someone of a who's not white, who comes into therapy, what advice might you have for them, especially I think in the climate of where we've been last year, where we see, I'm just going to be honest about it. We see there were protests, there were Confederate flags all over the place, and obviously that can be very much associated with a white identity for some folks too. So what are some good ways of just leveling the playing field, maybe for a therapeutic relationship? And I don't mean that of discounting anything. I just wanted to, how do we help everybody be comfortable in that room together, even though there's not that initial potential cultural understanding of each other? It's a big question, I know. I mean, I personally, I can start as a therapist. I try to talk about it with whoever I'm seeing. So if I am seeing somebody who is of a different culture or background, or even for a gender, for a female to be with me, I will ask about those types of things. I will ask about what is it, or maybe age too. I'm older. What if they're younger? I think disability status can come up in all of this as well. There are so many things. So I personally, as a therapist, tried to bring some of those things up right away, just to throw it out on the table, to offer the person the opportunity to discuss and to clear the air. Because I think what you said, Foluso, is very important. Some people might not be comfortable bringing that up, and then that could impede potentially the therapeutic relationship that's happening.
I think that approach is great. I as a therapist myself, and I really would welcome all therapists to take that approach, is to be the first one to put that out on the table and say, okay, these are some differences, with the invitation to collaborate and make that climate welcome for the client, to say, these are my experiences. Sometimes what ends up happening is it's also, it's what's explicit and also what's implicit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a therapist or an office, all of us are in telehealth right now, but whatever, there can be also cues sometimes that don't signify that diversity is welcome. So as therapists, we really have to make sure that, and like you said too, Vicky, that we're making sure that our words and our actions are lining up, right? And so we want to signify to whoever comes in that there is a safe space for me to talk about my experiences, and also that my therapist is going to listen to me and not discount my experience, even though they may not personally identify it and may not understand what could be traumatizing about it, that they're willing to listen and collaborate with me about how I'm going to get better, and understand too what that journey is. What experiences that the client may have had even before reaching that therapy office. That's really important. So how we ask questions, how, and understanding what sorts of concerns that a client may come in with, that have to do with race, especially. And so, what are the implications of, for instance, reporting that they're, especially with things like OCD and having thoughts of harm, right? And what are the implications of possibly, um, getting reported and things like that. So, because people do have those sorts of concerns, but perhaps there's another layer because of concerns about other experiences they may have had before. I mean, there are just so many things. And so we just
Yeah.
have to be really careful and sensitive about that. But I think it's really not so much about saying the exact words, but providing that welcoming environment in
Yeah.
what we say and also our behavior.
I also found it interesting over this last year, especially in the last 6 months, where there's been more that I've seen in treating mention of a type of OCD where people were afraid that maybe they were racist, and what if they weren't not racist enough, and their OCD would tell them all these things that could be racist. And so there were people who were, I remember in sessions, who were debating, I should be out and protesting, but then there's COVID and I could contaminate people or get contaminated. But so am I more concerned about myself with COVID, but then I'm not concerned enough about racism in the United States? Or should I be out there with protesting, but then does that mean if I get COVID and I bring it home that I get some, there were a lot of just so many internal debates that were going on with people this summer with all of the unrest that was going on. It was interesting to see how it was being manifested for individuals who had obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah, in addition to all the national stuff, we had, our flag changing over.
Oh, yes, in Mississippi,
so, yeah,
right.
Definitely been a, underlying theme for sure, when, I, meet new clients coming in, and there's definitely some concerns about being, racist or, not racist enough. And so there's definitely a lot of that in the undercurrent here, especially, I think.
Right. That was a big deal down there with that, wasn't it? Mm-hmm.
It was. And so what my approach was to, how are you feeling about, the flag stuff, and how is that affecting your life? Is it causing you anxiety, all of that? And so definitely I opened up the conversation for that, because that was a very hot subject here.
Yes. Wow. Well, let's get to some of our stream, and maybe we could go through some OCD questions and we'll see what we get. My biggest type of OCD is magical thinking. How can I do ERP for a fear of a specific future event going wrong? I can't know what happens for a week. How do I see the OCD is meaningless? Well, I mean, I'll throw in it, but I'm interested in your opinions as well. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, much less anything else. And I think that most people who don't have OCD will do what they can in the best way possible to try to plan for the best future that they can have. But they are also okay with the idea that sometimes poop hits the fan, and there's always going to be something that goes wrong. And maybe that's why we buy insurance or things like that, because we know that now and then things will not go wrong. But I think when OCD steps into it, there's almost this notion that anything going wrong will be unacceptable. And therefore, I must do everything that I possibly can to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And if it does go wrong, it's my fault because I didn't prepare for everything. Have you seen some of that as well, too?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
You can't prepare for everything, and the fear of a specific future event. I mean, this is just as a disclaimer too. I mean, this is not any substitute for therapy, or this doesn't,
no, by any means,
constitute a patient-professional relationship. But some like Dr. McGrath was saying, with these, we can't prepare for every future event, but sometimes in the work that we do, in terms of imaginal exposures and some of the things that we, in the type of work that we do when we sometimes writing out what you are concerned about happening, and writing out that worst case scenario and exposing yourself to that over and over again, writing it out, reading it till it's boring. Sometimes we do that type of work in our field, and you can find after a while that that worst case scenario that you're so concerned about becomes less fear provoking after some time. But the point is, we can't control anything. And the point also, too, is that you want to be accustomed to that level of uncertainty. And so you might not be able to, not accustomed to it. My point is that, yes, you're going to be uncertain about a lot of things, but are you able to go about your day, do other things with that level of uncertainty there and still proceed? Because we can't control the future, as uncomfortable as it is.
Yeah, and maybe that's the OCD lie of the future is controllable if you just do the right rituals or compulsions in the right order and right sequence and right way and right time, then you can be in control of the future. If that was the case, insurance companies would be out of business, though, because why would we ever need to buy insurance? Because then nothing would ever go wrong, because we would just have done all of the things that we need to do to prevent anything bad from happening. So there would never be car accidents. There would never be huge storms that would come in and take over. No one would need flood insurance or anything of that nature. No one's pipes would have frozen because we would have all done enough rituals to prevent the weather from making anything bad happen or anything like that. But we know that things happen, right? The proverbial, again, poop hits the fan now and then, and things spread around and things go bad. And OCD lies and says you could have controlled that, when the reality is that it's just the way that it is. Here's another one. I'm in ERP now, and the thoughts keep coming so rapidly and varying of the same theme. And now I'm starting to believe I don't have OCD and the thoughts are true. Is this common? Well, I would say yes. One of the things OCD tries to do is to trick you into getting to believe now something isn't OCD and it's actually true. And the only way to fix it is to have more OCD then. It's again, the lie OCD tells to keep itself around. OCD is one of the most self-perpetuating things I've ever had to interact with. And it will do or say anything that it needs to not go away. So I haven't yet found something that OCD does to get rid of itself. I've only found things that OCD does to keep itself around.
And OCD keeps itself around a lot. I mean, like, you said before, OCD is the doubting disorder. So
Yeah.
any way that it can instill doubt, it's going to instill doubt or bring doubt in some form or another. Whether it's not OCD, it's something else. You're accepting these thoughts now, so it means it's always going to instill doubt in some form or another. And
Right.
ERP is really helpful because ERP teaches you how to function in the midst of uncertainty. It helps you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, or get more comfortable, or at least tolerate it better.
Mm-hmm. And that's our goal, is tolerance, right? We have no guarantee about how anything's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes from now. I mean, someone could break into my house. I have no idea, right? I'm thinking it probably won't happen, but I have no guarantee of it whatsoever. And so we hope to teach everyone that they can live without a guarantee of what's going to happen. We hope to teach everyone to live without a guarantee of what has happened in the past. Right? If you look at, there's some great work by Elizabeth Loftus who shows memory recall is not so great, right, for people. And that really bothers people with OCD who have this false memory idea that, well, how can I be 100% sure of what I remember or don't? Well, none of us really can. I mean, it's just the way that it is. Memory can be influenced. If you look at the way a lawyer addresses in court, if they say, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other versus how fast were they going when they smashed into each other, you're going to evoke a different emotion from the jury when you say smashed versus hit, even though you might still remember the car accident. It's going to get a different kind of feeling from people based on words as well. So this idea of having a guarantee on anything, unfortunately, is the OCD trick. Can existential OCD make me feel like my whole world is falling apart? I sometimes question what's the point of everything, which makes me question everything, including metaphysical stuff. Or this another one here. My existential crisis is leading me to believe I might have OCD. Yeah, we get a lot on that. How do you deal with existential OCD and questioning reality? All those kinds of things. It makes me not want to get better because I just think, what's the point? I honestly just wish I could go back in time and wipe my memory. The existential stuff is fascinating, I think, especially because there's no limit, of course, with any OCD, but especially with existential OCD. Now when we're going out of the physical realm and we're going into the metaphysical realm and we're going into the spiritual realm and we're going into the different planes of existence realm and everything like that. I mean, OCD can go anywhere it wants that with that. And you can believe that we are a mere dream of a giant that is asleep and maybe our lives are a mere millisecond. We just perceive it to be longer because we're in a dream, or maybe our universe is nearly the tip of a hair of an amazingly massive universal being that has millions and billions of universes attached to it. All these things that I've heard from people of how do we actually know that we're here, where we are, who we are, all those things. And I think there's only two groups of people that think of this kind of stuff. One of them are philosophers who are paid to be at universities to think about these things and to propose some of these questions and write about them. And the others are people with obsessive compulsive disorder who think, I can't go on really being able to function in my life without knowing exactly what my life is at all times. When the rest of the people kind of live in oblivion, which the Matrix really exploited with, do you take the blue pill or the red pill and just live in oblivion, or do you want to go and see what's really out there, kind of thing. So, I love to use the Matrix as ERP and have people watch that movie and to sit with the discomfort of how will we ever truly know something or not. Right? I think that notion that we have to have an answer is another big OCD experience where most of us are okay with not having an answer to everything. People with OCD seem to want to have an answer to at least the thing their OCD is. And they're okay, it often seems to, without having the answer to all sorts of other things in their life. But when it comes to the thing that OCD has really glommed onto, now in this thing, I have to have an answer to it. If that's... Right. And can we function well without it? If the two of you see any questions on there on the, as you're kind of scrolling through also, please feel free, go ahead and jump in and grab one. Can OCD mess with concentration and memory? I'm so afraid of getting schizophrenia. That's my biggest fear. I mean, you'll notice that we could replace, I'm so scared of getting schizophrenia with a germ or an urge to harm someone or an image that I find disgusting or anything. I mean, you can take anything that is, I'm so afraid of getting, make a blank line there, and OCD, depending on the person, will fill that in based on what would be the scariest thing to them. Right? So to me, I'm interested in your opinions. It's less about the fear that I will become a person who has schizophrenia. And it's more about a fear that there's something out there that my brain tells me might turn and might go against everything that I think of myself as. And if that were to happen, I don't know how I would handle it. And just how overwhelming then that can feel to so many people. Right.
Definitely, yeah.
I like. Oh, did you have one? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I will. I was looking at a question here
Mhm.
that the, about the only OCD that I have is affecting my work. I keep repeating my work.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Take it. Hmm.
and so, we talk about, we talked about this, um, with this person. I'm not sure what kind of work you do, but something that you could do with that. You say you keep repeating your work. I'm wondering what type of work this is, but that, definitely has to do with perfectionism. And so there's always, something that you could easily do is just, when the next time you have something that you need to do, maybe if it's sending an email, or, you could start small, but if you need to send an email or send a message or something like that, send the message, send the email, but don't check it, right? Or even try, or maybe even have a typo in there and send it.
Hmm.
Think about not, because with a lot of times when people have these sorts of concerns with their OCD, the perfectionism and the thoughts about the perfectionism and the demand for that is, um, again, that the issue of control that we've been talking about, and how we want with OCD and with that particular idea that it's focusing on, it really wants control over one specific issue. So we want certainty with this one thing, but then with other areas, we're fine with not having certainty. And so, that comes up with perfectionism quite a bit. And so that's one way of dealing with it, but really understanding that with OCD, it's not rational. And so there's all this doubt and a lot of demand for a level of a level of certainty that's just never going to be possible. And so that's something to keep in the back of your mind, that you're never going to have that level of control or certainty that you're desiring. However, the way we go about it is understanding, can you do that work? Can you send off that email or whatever that project is? Understanding that, yes, I'm going to have this level of uncertainty and still go about it anyway. And the more you do that, the easier it's going to become.
Yeah, I've seen this also in, to bring some of our kind of cultural conversation into this as well, that for newer workers, this could be very difficult because they think they have to prove something. For people who are coming in who have a cultural background that's different than maybe the majority of the people working at their job, they may also have that notion that I have to be better and harder, or work harder than everybody else in order to prove myself. And so you can see how various aspects of age and ability status and culture could also play into that notion of perfectionism in all of this, and be ripe then for OCD to really grab onto as well, and make it even a stronger desire for someone to feel like they have to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard things like that, quite often, and especially when you think about, the acculturative stress, and when you think about
Yeah.
acculturative stress is basically coming from a different culture, integrating into the stress that comes from uh, basically taking on the norms of the culture that you are adapting to. And so when you think about things like checking and making sure that your work is perfect, a lot of that comes from messages that you might get from, from the pressure to immigrate when you immigrate, hearing from parents, you have to make sure that you don't let us down. You might be maybe the first one in the family that's coming over to go to college. There's just a lot, and so when you think about those sorts of pressures, the sorts of demands, the sorts of pressures, and just expectations of excellence, this could be fertile ground for a lot of those things, for those OCD tendencies, as well as the like I talked about, the acculturative stress, and then also sometimes when we think about discrimination too, people may look at it in sort of these ways that you might think that it has to be directly experienced, right? So some people think, well, unless somebody's directly experiencing discrimination, being maybe called names or having things directly happen to them, that they're not experiencing discrimination. But it can be indirect. So for instance, seeing things happening on the news, or maybe even, I'm reading a research article about how this can look different in different age groups. So for maybe teens who are doing online gaming and hearing other people use racial slurs, or seeing, different sorts of perhaps, just offensive sort of slogans or imagery and things like that, that can be just as traumatizing. And so when you see that indirect, or known as vicarious trauma, that can
Yeah.
Also, seeing comments, on social media,
Yeah.
and being exposed to that through different sorts of means, or different medium rather, that's a way where people can experience this. And so sometimes when you see that, and just even, and also research has shown that people who already have OCD and who are experiencing discrimination, their symptoms are going to go up. And so that's also something to be very aware of and to keep in mind.
Yes, absolutely. We know stressors increase the just bloom of OCD that somebody may be experiencing, and those cultural stressors, race stressors could be there too. And I could just think my parents never had to have a conversation with me about walking around my neighborhood with a hoodie on, and yet all of my Black friends have talked about having to sit down with their children and talk about, you got to watch when you're walking around and what you're wearing. And, that's just something that I personally never had to experience, and don't know of anyone in my family who is white who did. And yet for people in my family who are not white, and there are those are conversations they've had to have. So. And just little stressors like that, which to people who don't understand it, see it as maybe a little stressor, and to people who are in that culture, it's not a little stressor, it's a massive stressor, right? That we have to even be careful on that language and on how we think about it. And this is the idea of how can we walk in someone else's shoes for a bit to understand where they're coming from. We have to check ourselves, I think, every day, and not brush off the idea that when we see something on the news and we might think, well, it's not really a big deal. It's maybe not a big deal to us because in our culture it's not happening, but in someone else's it is. And it is a very big deal in that other culture as well too. So I hope that's how I hope all of us start to take a look at things through that lens of when you step outside of how you grew up and you try to understand the way that other people have grown up, be it as an immigrant, be it as someone who grew up in a different socioeconomic status or in a different neighborhood or something like that, we can't assume that we understand those stressors, and they are not little stressors whatsoever, and we can't just look at them that way. So important. Lots of thank yous for the Q&A session tonight. So, well, that's wonderful. Thank you all for listening. We always appreciate it. And I always love having guests. So thank you both for being with me. Once again, everyone, tonight's webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app that you can get on Google Play or iOS. And also go to treatmyocd.com or nocd.com if you would like to meet with one of our therapists for teletherapy. We will do a screening with you and then get you set up for that. So we hope that you will reach out. We don't want anyone with OCD to have to sit and suffer with OCD. We want you to know that there is help available. There's a lot of existential tonight. Someone else has a thought about the world ending and something disastrous could happen. And a fear that I wouldn't be able to handle it. And, well, I'll tell you what, if the world did start to end, I don't know anybody who would handle it well. Would either of you handle that very well if the world was ending right now? No. Okay. So I think we're all in agreement. Halen brought that one up. Halen, I think we're all in agreement with you. None of us would handle the world ending very well whatsoever if it was imminently happening. Now, here's something we know: the world will end. I mean, we can see this from studying other galaxies and other solar systems and everything like that. We know that the world will end, but as far as we can tell, we've got several billion more years. So I don't think any of us is going to be around for the witnessing or experiencing of that. That being said, sometimes I think even for OCD, and this is important maybe to bring up, especially in light of our discussions of diversity and being very understanding, someone could say this who has OCD to people who don't have OCD, and they're going to think, that's crazy. Why would you even think something? I mean, what are you talking about? And even then, just to use the discrimination discussion, the discrimination that people with a mental health issue sometimes experience in the world, and why there are stigmas still to this day, because we can't step outside sometimes of our own mind and the way we see the world to try to understand how other people see it as well. You know, I remember once doing a simulator that was a virtual reality simulator for psychosis, and putting the goggles on, and you're interacting with someone, and suddenly you hear a voice that's coming from, this earbud that's saying, you might want to hurt them, right, or something, and then you're looking around and you don't see anything moving or anything, but you feel a breeze because there's a fan and it puts a breeze on you. And it was really interesting to kind of step outside of how I view the world and to take a look at what is it like for somebody who actually experiences some of these issues too. How do they live in the world? And it really gave me a good understanding of that. And I appreciate all of those. That's what I love about really working with OCD as well too, is I can read everything on this feed and be like, oh yeah, I could see how you would think that, because I've worked with OCD for so long that I can understand how OCD thinks about things. But the opposite side is, and I think this is important for everybody listening, that we also don't want to belittle it, right? When somebody says, oh, I have a little OCD, how non-understanding of OCD that kind of statement actually is to people who have OCD. And when COVID was hitting, and I heard a news report, and they were all very socially distanced, and someone on the news report said, well, maybe it would be great if all of us had a little OCD right now, and then we wouldn't get COVID. And I wrote a blog post about that, just saying that is the worst thing that you could possibly say. I mean, imagine going up to somebody who was overweight and suggesting developing a little bit of an eating disorder would be a great way to deal with your weight issue. I mean, look how insensitively awful something like that is, right? Well, it's the same thing when we say, it'd be great to have a little OCD, or I'm a little OCD in these situations too. So, discrimination comes in all forms. And that's, again, why I'm always appreciative to do these Diversity Matters series, is to bring those to the forefront of everybody who's listening, to keep that in mind. So.
Yeah. Yes. And to piggyback on what you said too, is it not only, wanting to listen, and also wanting to believe what, like there's, I didn't say this, there's another psychologist, Monica Williams, who does a lot of research on diversity. And
hi, Monica, if you're watching, we love you, Monica. You're wonderful.
Yeah, she is. And she talked about this, a UFO poster that says, I want to believe, and having that attitude of, yes, I want to believe your experience, and just having that attitude when you talk with other people, just generally, that, yes, there's, we understand, and I understand too, that, when you, especially if you have OC and having to deal with this doubt, that yes, there are people out there, that lie, and that, are not kind and things like that. But let's also have an attitude when we are talking with people about their experience that, yes, I want to believe that your experience is a genuine experience and here's where you're coming from, and so when someone tells you this is what my experience is like, just not even, I mean, yes, with race and with diversity and with with different types of really different challenges that they've had, and also with just whatever they've been going through, having that kindness and openness that, yes, I want to believe, instead of approaching it with suspicion or with, well, I want to just nitpick or cut down what you're saying. And I think that when we talk about having a culturally open and a culturally sensitive therapy experience, that's what we also, when a client feels comfortable disclosing different sorts of things to us as therapists, that's when they can sense that from us is, yes, I want to believe, even though I may not have personally experienced what you've been through, I want to believe and help me understand what you've been through. And kind of like what you were saying too, Vicky, from the beginning, and talking about validating the client's experience, how you do that and how you inform and just all those things. That's what we need to do, because OCD is tough enough in and of itself. And
Got that right.
we'll have this experience with clients where they may not want to share the different types of intrusive thoughts. They want reassurance that they're not going to get reported for different things. So imagine somebody who is coming from a diverse background, somebody who already has these stereotypes of somebody who may be more likely to cause harm, who may be more likely to be, somebody who people need to be afraid of. They're thinking, can I trust you to share these things? And am I going to get reported? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to get locked away? Like, are you a safe person? So as therapists, we need to be aware of that, and also be aware of what's happened to them way before they've come to our therapy room. What we may not know. We need to be sensitive to that, and really and be sensitive, be aware of that, and have that compassion, but also that clinical knowledge.
Mhm.
Right. It's important to convey that there's no judgment, and that just the unconditional, just positive regard, and just to get those walls taken down so that they do feel comfortable, sharing and, overcoming any stereotypes they think you might have.
I'd be interested from the two of you then. So there may be people listening out there or this will go on our NoCD YouTube page, who are going to listen to this, who are contemplating doing therapy, right? But maybe they have heard negative things about therapy. Maybe there is a stigma about people who've gone into therapy. Maybe culturally, mental health is not talked about or accepted. What would be your suggestions to that person who's listening to this right now, who so wants to do it but is afraid to take that first step? What can they do to be maybe inspired to give it a go, take that chance?
Well, I'll say culturally for me, I'm part Filipino. So, mental health is, kind of a taboo there. And so, in some of my profiles, it shows that, that I'm Filipino and, that I speak the language. And so those people do come to me and they're a little reserved, but then, they'll get going and they'll say, I tell my parents and they say there's nothing wrong with me, to pray or whatever. And I was like, I get it. And they're like, you do, what I'm dealing with. And so I think just, definitely having the background, helps. And then just being able to listen and put myself in other people's shoes and, take in, what everybody is experiencing, and, creating that level of comfort so that people, can share, that just knowing that, I'm not going to be judging anything, and I'm completely open to, sharing in their experience and, helping them through this process.
Right.
Yes. And I think, just to piggyback on what Vicky said, is, that when someone is thinking about that, understand that the therapists like Vicky are out there. Therapists that are going to be compassionate, that are going to resonate with your experience, that are not going to judge you. And also to say that we need to redefine what strength is, because I get this a lot from my clients, from culturally diverse backgrounds, is they'll say, well, I know I'm supposed to be strong. And in our culture, we talk about strength. And so when you're strong, you don't ask for help. And I want to encourage everyone, let's redefine what strength is, especially when that definition of strength is harming us. So we think about, this archetype of like the strong Black woman, and there's research that's showing that that is actually harming, that's harmful, that having that identity is causing, stress to the body. It's making one more susceptible to illness, thinking that way, because when you think of yourself, it's good to have strength and it's good to be resilient. But when you're thinking, if I'm a strong Black woman, am I going to get help or ask for help? It's causing different. It's making you more susceptible to stress related illnesses and not getting the help you need. And so I would say, let's redefine what strength is, right? Strength is also being courageous, because you're going, you're taking a step into the unknown and doing something, and you don't know what's going to happen, right? And so I commend my clients when they come in and I say, that's really courageous and brave of you to take this first step, coming in not knowing what's happening, what's going to happen, but still taking that step to do something for yourself to get better, so that you can reach your goals, help others around you, and also help yourself. And so I would say, let's redefine strength. Yes, cultures can say this and say that, but you can also start making some definitions for yourself and saying, well, this is how I'm going to define what my journey is, and what strength looks like for me, and what health looks like for me. And so, there are people that are going to support you. There are people like, Dr. McGrath, like, that are out there, like Vicky, that are out there. They're not going to judge you or look down on you because of what you're going through. And so, and you can interview your therapist too. I mean, just
Yeah.
like people,
Yeah.
go to a doctor. If you go to a doctor and they're not working out well for you, you can always see a different one.
Yep.
And so it's just, well, I just want to say, let's redefine what being strong is, because that definition of strength that's keeping people in the shadows and not getting them help is not helping anybody. So
No, I agree. I've heard a few different quotes about in order to be brave, you first have to be afraid, right? And maybe the definition of strength is knowing when you need to rely on someone else, and not just keeping to push that all to yourself, because as you said, that could be the thing that pushes you down. Actually, that maybe that in that instance, that's not strength, that's stubbornness, right? And maybe it'd be better to be full of strength than to be full of stubborn or something like that. So someone said, I have OCD, and I'm a washer. Where can I go to get help? Well, check out NoCD. Download the NoCD app on Google Play or iOS, or reach out to us at nocd.com or treatmyocd.com, and we would be more than happy to help set you up with a provider for teletherapy for OCD, which we do in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and now the United Kingdom as well. So welcome to our UK friends as well. We're happy to have you here. I like this. I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes my OCD pisses me off. Like, my OCD thoughts are the complete opposite of who I am and my feelings. I wish sometimes OCD was materialized so I could beat the shit out of it. I like that. Yeah, I think a lot of people would like that too. And yet, it shows how powerful our minds are, right? How much a diagnosis can really screw with us, and really have a massive interference in our life. OCD wouldn't be listed by the World Health Organization as one of the top 10 most disabling disorders in the world if it didn't have very, very significant impact on people's lives. Alina, My OCD thoughts center around harm thoughts, like self-harm OCD thoughts, suicidal thoughts, harming someone thoughts, and I don't really have a good way of coping with it right now. So, well, let's help with coping with that. That's what I would say. And maybe the first thing to think about is that coping might not be the thing that we want to do, but facing might be something that we want to work toward. How do we face with those thoughts? I wonder if coping sometimes sends a message to people that I'm going to have to cope with this for the rest of my life, and always have to be dealing with it. And while we don't cure OCD, we can get, I've seen very often, to a point in people's lives where OCD can be sitting in the trunk of the car and just muffled and gagged. And though it's along for the ride, it doesn't have to be all that interfering in people's lives. So could it be that what is the thing that you could do right now? If you don't have a therapist, reach out to a therapist. And maybe that's one of the messages that's been underlying this conversation all night, is how do people reach out to get the help that they need and be brave enough to do such a thing? And how do people take that first step to actually talking to someone who will understand them and not judge them? I like what you said, Vicki, about that concept of judgment and how that can be something that gets in the way. And how can we help people not feel like they're going to be judged, but know that they're coming into a situation where someone will understand them and appreciate them for who they are and work with them on the goal that they want to. It's not a goal that all of us have as therapists. We don't tell you what you should or shouldn't be. We want to know what you want to be and where you want to go, and we want to be there to help you get to that point. Now, in terms of the harm, yeah, I mean, if we believe that our rituals and our compulsions have prevented harm, then we're going to keep doing our compulsions. Right? I've often told the story, if any of you ever come to NoCD's headquarters in downtown Chicago, you may see that there's a homeless man on Michigan Avenue. And if you ever go up to him and say, "Sir, I notice you're carrying a 25-foot bamboo pole. Why are you doing that?" He will say, "Well, it keeps the elephants away." And if you say, "Sir, there's no elephants in Chicago," he will say, "Well, the pole is working very well." And we can believe that things are related to each other, even if they're not actually related to each other. The lack of occurrence of something can be attributed to something else, even if it has no relationship to that thing whatsoever. So if every time I do a compulsion and I don't get hurt, or I don't hurt someone, I come to believe that it is the compulsion that has kept myself and everyone else around me safe. And our job as therapists is to teach you that relationship might not actually be true. That might be just a correlation, not a causation, right? And just because things correlate doesn't mean they have any relationship of cause whatsoever. So we want to help you recognize the fact that there are very, very different things going on with cause. What would you guys add to that? They've muted themselves. They will not speak to me anymore. Oh, there, Vicky's back. Okay.
I think just kind of, taking in that it's not the thoughts that are, the problem, it's the significance that you assign to them. And so just working on, lowering that significance. And
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is fascinating that we can have a disorder that tells us that most of our thoughts aren't significant unless they're in this one little band, and then they're amazingly significant. Once we cross over that one line just into this one little area, they are so significant, it's ridiculous. I have sensory motor OCD and I keep getting stuck on one thing. Should I intentionally focus on the bodily process that is bothering me, or should I acknowledge it and then move on, not dwelling? I think you can do all of those things in therapy. I think sometimes for a purposeful ERP, you might just sit there and focus on it and recognize over time that the more that you try to focus on it, the harder it is to actually focus on. So if I told you, don't think of a pink elephant, there's going to be one that pops in your head. But if I tell you to only think of a pink elephant, after a few minutes, you're going to think, I'm kind of hungry. I got to go to the bathroom. Oh, wait, no, I'm supposed to be thinking of a pink elephant. Okay. So our brain is kind of opposite driven, right? There's some interesting things that happen that in these types of situations. When we try to think of something, it becomes hard to not to focus on that thing. And when we try not to think of something, it's very easy to think of that thing. So there's this opposite effect that kind of goes on in the brain, and it's kind of fascinating. So sometimes in therapy, we might purposely have you think of something so that you'll just learn how to get bored with it over time, which will happen. And then other times we'll want you to be able, when something pops up randomly, to acknowledge it and move on and let it go. How do you deal with the thought that you might be going to hell for something you did or you're going to do, even if that makes absolutely no sense as to why you'd be punished for that? That's a good question. Either of you want to jump on that one? I'm happy to take it, but
Well, again, I think it's the uncertainty that we've talked about before. And I don't really have a specific way of answering this. I mean, I know that the type of OCD that sounds like it might be is along the lines of religious scrupulosity, right? And so if you think
yeah.
about this, oh, you might be going to hell for something that you did do, right? There's no way that you can get certainty about that or not if you think about it from a feeling standpoint. And so I don't know, if we're not going to look at this not from a religious standpoint, but from an OCD standpoint, the goal that you would want to achieve through therapy is being able to go about whatever you're doing, go about your day, and not avoid certain things that you think may send you to hell for whatever, I don't know what it is that you think you did that may be sending you to hell, but a lot of times when we see these sorts of things, it may be avoidance around certain issues. And so it may be avoiding certain numbers, or it may be avoiding certain things where you think you may do something, maybe being in a quiet place and yelling out certain things that may be, considered bad. I'm not sure, but the point of all of this is to understand that sometimes people are looking for this feeling of certainty or this feeling of assurance that, okay, if I feel this way, then I know I'm not going to hell, where it's not a matter of feeling, it's a matter of understanding that feelings change. Sometimes you're going to feel certain about certain things and sometimes you're not. And if you're looking at it from a faith perspective, if you're, if that's where you are in this journey, that that feelings can seem very real because of OCD. And so because you can feel very anxious sometimes, and those anxious feelings lead you to believe that the anxious feeling is reality, you're using those as a barometer for a lot of things. The way we proceed with that is to teach you that, yes, you can have really challenging feelings from time to time, even feel very uncertain, but let's figure out what you're avoiding and teach you to go about living your life, understanding that, yes, there's always going to be feelings of uncertainty that pop up from time to time. Let's not have those be the driving force that controls everything you do.
Mm-hmm. I'd also say that I've never once met an OCD said that you might be going to heaven. I've only met OCD that have said you might be going to hell. So OCD never picks the best case scenario. It only picks the worst case scenario and gets you to believe that that thing might be true. So if that's the case, OCD is purely one-sided. It is only on the negative side. And it's also then makes OCD amazingly predictable. And I've always said this, when something's predictable, can it really be that scary? Because it's actually amazingly predictable. If you see a horror movie 50 times, you aren't going to really be scared by it anymore because it's already predictable. You know every time when someone's going to pop out from behind a curtain or something like that. OCD can be like that as well too. It's always going to go with the worst case scenario. And if you could predict that, how much do you need to be afraid of that? With that, we'll leave it here. Welcome, everyone, once again. We have appreciated having you here with us tonight on our Wednesday night webinar for NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get on Google Play or iOS. Go to nocd.com or treatmyocd.com if you're looking for teletherapy. I want to thank our guest tonight for being here with me. I very much appreciate both of you for joining me tonight. It was absolutely wonderful. And if you want to meet awesome therapists that we have at NoCD, like these two wonderful, wonderful people that I've had with me tonight, reach out to us at NoCD.
Thank you for having us.
Having us.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.